Martinez at Center for Orthopedic Specialists. This is the training for ICD-10 for the billing department. So ready or not, ICD-10 is finally upon us. This is a general overview of the timeline that we're going to follow in moving towards implementation. With the practice management software, we're going to be looking within the system to find places where ICD-9 is now going to be replaced by ICD-10. That's going to involve some system updates as well as some manual changes to our libraries. The clearinghouse readiness is mostly out of our hands. We'll just have to keep informed on their testing schedules. The payer readiness, we will be looking at those payers individually to make sure that we are going to be submitting the information that they require. This includes not only ANSI coding submissions, but also any medical necessity requirements that they may have in place with the new codes. The practice readiness sort of overlies with the eClinicalWorks readiness in that we will be looking to make sure that those systems are updated. But in addition, we're going to be doing training for all departments and taking a second look at any workflow changes that need to be made. Our whole process will culminate in the testing between our software, the clearinghouses, and the payers. And the go live date is October 1st, 2015. So everyone is probably thinking, along with the rest of the healthcare community, why do we have to go through this huge undertaking with all of its potential pitfalls and hassles? Well, for one, ICD-9 is outdated, plain and simple. The United States is way behind the ball in diagnostic coding. It's time we catch up with the rest of the global health community. The ICD-10 selection is vastly improved over ICD-9. Diagnosing is going to become, from a coding standpoint, is going to become much more detail-oriented. So let's take a closer look at the coding structure differences between the two systems, ICD-9 and ICD-10. ICD-9 is a 3 to 5 character code. The first being alpha, E or V, which is our late effects or accident codes. 2 through 5 are numeric, the decimals after the third digit. An example is 813.22. In ICD-10, we'll be moving to a 3 to 7 digit code. The first character being alpha, the second numeric. 3 through 7 can be alpha or numeric. The decimal stays the same. And the example I've given is a crosswalk from the closed fracture shaft of ulna, 813.22, to the ICD-10 code of S52.211A. As you can see, it's a much more specific description for going from closed fracture shaft of ulna to green stick fracture of shaft of right ulna, initial encounter for closed fracture. Take a closer look at the ICD-10 structure. We're going to utilize S86.011A as our coding example. The first 3 characters in the coding structure are the category. The category is the disease, underlying or related condition, and it's followed by a decimal point. The next 3 digits, 4, 5, and 6, are the clinical details, such as etiology, the cause of the disease, its severity, anatomical location, and other vital details like laterality. In our example of S86.011A, the category of S would be the injury, poisoning, and certain other consequences of external causes related to a single body region. S86 then becomes injury of muscle, fascia, and tendon at lower leg. S86.0 becomes injury of Achilles tendon. S86.01 is strain of Achilles tendon, and S86.011 is strain of right Achilles tendon. As you can see, as the digits are added, it becomes a more specific code. The 7th digit is an extension, and it can change the meaning of the descriptor. In this case, the A stands for initial encounter. So for injuries and external causes, we have 3 choices. We have the initial and subsequent encounters, and we have the S character for conditions that are a consequence of a previous disease or injury. For fractures, we have 2 initial encounters for either open or closed fracture, and then we have 4 subsequent encounters for routine healing, delayed healing, non-union, and malunion. And again, we have the consequence of previous disease or injury with the sequela. The X character in ICD-10 serves as a placeholder, and that's the only time the X will be used. The extender has 2 uses. It can be put into the place of the 5th character in a 6th character structure, which allows for future expansion. Here's an example, M22.3X1. And it can also be utilized in a structure where there are fewer than 6 characters, but a 7th character is required. Chapter 19, for example, requires that we code out to the highest level of specificity. And so we would need to utilize the X if the code available to us is fewer than 6 characters. So the example that we're reviewing here is TA4.53XS. The arrangement of the coding manuals for ICD-10 are going to be just as they were in ICD-9. There will still be a tabular listing and an alphabetical index. For us in orthopedics, we'll be mostly concerned with Chapter 13, diseases of the musculoskeletal system and connective tissues, and also diseases of the skin and subcutaneous tissues in Chapters 12, and injuries, poisonings, and other certain consequences of external causes in Chapters 19. By utilizing ICD-10, the physicians will be able to capture much more detailed information when it comes to the patient's health. This will lead to better reporting, and details will now include severity, complexity, comorbidities, complications, and other important associated factors concerning the patient's health. Fracture codes specifically have undergone an exponential expansion. For example, in ICD-9, the fracture of a femur had 16 codes to choose from. In ICD-10, there are now 1,530 codes to select from. So with all of these codes now at our disposal, it's helpful to think of the process of choosing the code in terms of a decision tree. Start at the top with the type of fracture. Then move down into the laterality, or the location of the fracture, and then end in the episode of care. An example of a femur fracture in ICD-10 would be S72.341D. This would be a displaced spiral fracture of shaft of right femur, subsequent encounter for closed fracture with routine healing. As you can see, we've coded out to the highest level of specificity. A quick word on the unspecified or not otherwise classified codes, or not elsewhere classified codes that we are accustomed to in ICD-9. There are unspecified codes in ICD-10, however, we should proceed with caution because really there are so many codes to select from at such great detail. We really don't want to be relying on those unspecified codes. Instead, The physicians need to document to the highest level of specificity, and we should choose the code accordingly. Thankfully, there are a few ways that we can utilize our practice management software, eClinicalWorks, to map the ICD-9s to ICD-10s. The first of which is found under the billing band, ICD, ICD-9 to ICD-10 conversion utility. You simply need to enter in your ICD-9 code, and the system will map to the ICD-10 options. As you can see, S86.011 came up for strain of right Achilles tendon, initial encounter, the same example we used in an earlier slide. This module is limited, however. As you'll notice, there are no options for subsequent or sequela. So this, unfortunately, is a limited resource. This same conversion can be found in other areas of the software. For instance, in the progress note, in the module that the physician sees when he's treating a patient and documenting his services, he can do the same thing by selecting a code, clicking on Auto Map to ICD-10, and he'll be given the mapping conversions. This V58.89 if you'll bear with me for just a moment. V58.89 is the mapping for the subsequent encounter. It's another specified aftercare. Unfortunately, it's mapped to many codes because that's such a generic term and a generic code. But if we were to search through these, we would find S86.011 S or D. I'm told that we will be offered a system that will help us map more specifically, but in the meantime, this is the one that's available to us for training. The other place that we can find that mapping is within the claim itself. If the physician selects the ICD-10 code, then obviously it will be transferred over to the claim. But should the physician not code to ICD-10 and he only codes to ICD-9, we can select that ICD-9 code, click on Auto Map to ICD-10, and we'll be given the same mapping as was available in the progress note itself. The other way that we can look up mapping is through Encoder Pro. And everybody should have access to this user name and login via Evernote. So we have 845.09, which is that other Achilles tendon, sprains and strains of ankle and foot. We select the ICD-10, and it'll give us the mappings to ICD-10. One of the key components of coding in ICD-10 is proper and detailed clinical documentation. Now, this is something that we should be doing all along, but with ICD-10, it's really important. Here are some things that the physicians can include in their documentations in order to help code to the highest level of specificity. Type, severity, episode, temporal factors, findings, manifestation, cause associated with, agent, location, laterality, anatomy, time parameters, infectious agent, remission status, associated conditions, contributing factors, and history of. So who will facilitate this ICD-10 transition? we have created a committee, and each department has been assigned a liaison. This will be the person you will report to with any questions or concerns, and the liaisons will meet together as a group to discuss those issues. And with that, this concludes the ICD-10 training for the billing department. Thank you.